Times I'm way over, but I think we hit it just right today. So if anyone comes in and doesn't have a handout, my bad. All right, I can make more tomorrow or whatever. All right. So I wasn't here last week. I apologize for that. We took the kids up to a little trip for the Biltmore, but I saw Jared do it. And I saw class, and he went over chapter 17, and it was great. So I'm going to do chapter 18 today. It looks like we kind of have it pretty good. Like we'll be doing a chapter a week from this point forward, but 21 is a little short, so we might combine 20 and 21 there the second last week, and then their last week will kind of be like an overall review. So I still haven't decided about that, but if anybody else has any thoughts about that, just let me know, and that's how we'll proceed from there, okay? But we're going to be in John 18 today, so if you want to get your Bibles out, get there and get ready so we can get started. Last week, like I said, Jared was doing, I get my clicker working, there we go. So Jared did 17, and y'all talked about prayer a good little bit. I listened to y'all talk about how we need to make sure that we're praying for even things we don't know, things are in the future, right? And how Jesus is the one who prayed for us, which is a powerful, powerful verse. I mean, I told Jared I was a little jealous that he got to do 17 and I didn't get to do it, because I think that's just one of the coolest things to realize that Jesus didn't just pray for his disciples, he prayed for all believers in the future. That means he prayed for me, right? That means he prayed for you, right? That means 2,000 years ago, Dale, Jesus prayed for you and what you were going to do in the world, right? And that's just an amazing thing to me. It blows my mind in so many ways, right? But now we're getting on to the part where it's kind of the story I think we're very, very familiar with, right? We've heard it since Sunday school, right? About Jesus being arrested, his trial, right? And then leading to his crucifixion. I mean, this is one that we all know, right? So I don't think we have to reread the entire thing, but I think it's important that we go over some certain parts, because when I was trying to study, just some certain things popped out to me. Do you remember earlier how we were talking about how Jesus had said his time had come? Remember? Right? And how is he preparing his disciples for when he leaves? Right? Remember, he says, I've told you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. Right? Remember, we talked about getting people on the right path and knowing what's coming up. Jesus tells them that you're going to have trouble in the future. Right? Remember, Jesus reminds them that if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it will love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world. But I have chosen you out of this world. That is why the world hates you. Okay? So he's telling them that, hey, troubles are coming, right? Bad things are coming. But I have to leave you. Remember, I have to leave you. Why? Because if I don't leave, then what doesn't come? That's right, the Holy Spirit, the advocate, right? And he also tries to tell them that after I leave, it's your job to testify, right, to what you have seen me do, right? You have been with me from the beginning, right? It's now your job to go out and to tell people what you've seen, what you have witnessed, what you have seen, okay? All right, so now let's talk about his arrest, right? Remember, he gets arrested where? Garden, right? Garden of Gethsemane. I had to look that up online. That's where you can go see it today. It's quite a beautiful place, right? John doesn't name it of the Garden of Gethsemane, but this is the one in the Kidron Valley, right? It's one that Jesus had been to before, according to John, right? So he'd been there several times, because who had been there with him before several times? Who knew to find them there? Somebody said it. Judas. Yeah, Judas knew to find him there, right? And so that's what we're coming up to, all right? We have the betrayal, right? And Judas aids, them finding Jesus during the arrest and everything. What do you think about Judas and his role? We've read about it, right? John's mentioned him several times, right? All up until this point. Kind of a little sidebar or whatever, but just before we go any further, what do you think about Judas and what he did?
I don't think he knew Jesus that well,
Yeah. Even though he traveled with them, right?
He's the last one, when he's at the supper and everything. That's when I realized that's when Judas showed up. But in the whole thing, he's always talking about John and Matthew and James and all the other ones. But Judas, that's why he found out. I think he is the last one. And he started asking around where Jesus would be at before all this, when they're having that supper,
So Judas had been with Jesus for a while before, so don't forget that. But I think you're right that Judas didn't really seem to know Jesus. I think you're exactly right, Eddie. Okay? Right? What do the rest of y'all think? Do you remember what John says about Judas? John's opinion of Judas is quite clear, right? Like John doesn't hold back, right? I mean, he really and truly doesn't. I mean, you remember Paul, I can't remember if it was Titus, when he was writing about the people in Crete and how they're liars and not good people and stuff. I mean, Paul didn't hold back in that one, just like John doesn't hold back in his opinion of Judas here. So just to look at a couple of points that he makes, and we'll kind of skip around in some different orders, right? Jesus, right, calls Judas the devil. Right, this is after he feeds the 5,000 and he says, I've been with all of you, but one of you is a devil. And in a little sidebar, John says he was talking about Judas Iscariot. In case you didn't know, this is exactly who Jesus is talking about. Right? John makes sure he includes that. Right? He's called a thief. Remember when the oil, right, is being poured on Jesus, right? The nard, right, the perfume. Right? And he's being anointed, and who's the one that speaks up and says, why are we doing that? Judas is the one who speaks up, right? John throws in there that he was a thief, right? He's the one that carried all the money, right? He's an unbeliever. That's what Jesus said about him. Again, this is the same part where he feeds the 5,000, right? Jesus said, you guys are with me and you believe, but there's those of you who do not believe. And again, John mentions, in case you don't know who he's talking about, that's Judas. Right? John keeps saying it over and over and over, right? He's called a traitor by John, right here in 18, right? He was the traitor, right? We hear in John 13, right? This is what Eddie was talking about, the Last Supper, and it's also mentioned in Luke, right? Where when Jesus hands him the bread, right? What enters into Judas? The devil. Satan enters into Judas, okay? So all of this we have in John, right? So, what do you think John's opinion was of Judas? Best friends? No, right? He seems to hold some ill will. Now, interestingly enough, in the Gospels, what happens to Judas after the crucifixion?
He hangs himself.
All right, hangs himself, right? Other Gospels, what does he try to do with the 30 pieces?
Give it back.
Tries to give it back, right? He goes to buy a field. Right? You can read, I think in another one, how it's called the field of blood, and he falls and his intestines fall out and all that kind of stuff. That's why it's called the field of blood. But John does not speak about him anymore after this. Right? John doesn't mention him anymore. That's done. Now that's, you can say whatever. I mean, some Gospels, go into more detail on some things than the other. But John specifically makes it a point not to talk about this guy anymore. Right? He had mentioned him, like I just showed you, several times throughout the gospel, but he totally leaves him out from this point forward. And I think that's very interesting, right? I mean, John, I think, really dislikes Judas. I think he's angry about Judas. And remember, John writes his gospel, right? It's one of the last ones to be written, right? I mean, so this is years after the crucifixion, okay? John, I think he's had a lot of time to think about this, to stew about this. And I think if he's mentioning these little sidebars, even as early as chapter 6 and stuff, that just kind of shows you how he feels about Judas even years later, right? So I don't know about y'all, that's just kind of how I read it and I was thinking about it, right? But interesting to me, okay? All right, so when we go to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus knows what is going to happen, right? We hear that in verse 4, right? He knows what's going to happen. Remember earlier he told the disciples, I am telling you all this, why?
So you can believe.
So when it happens, you will believe, right? So that you will not fall away, okay? And I thought this was very interesting, right? The soldiers, when Jesus steps up, right? Let's look at that part. Jesus steps up, and they're going, and Jesus says, who do you want, right? This is in verse 4, and they say, we want Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus says, I am he, right? And then that's where we have the little sidebar, and Judas the traitor was staying there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, what did the soldiers do? Yeah, they draw back and fall to the ground, right? I mean, Jesus just says, that's me. Why do they do that? Why? I mean, they fall back, right, and fall to the ground.
I never really paid attention to that little fact there, and it's like a sign of reverence almost, but
they're there to arrest the guy, right? I mean, the police show up and they go, are you Ken? Wait, do they do? No, they get you and they arrest you and whatever, right?
Yeah. Why they did it is strange.
Isn't that?
Well, they may have heard of some of the stories and miracles that Jesus performed. Maybe.
Maybe.
Speculation.
But think about.
Do you think they're the kind of people that are going to fall back in reverence, though?
I'm not saying in reverence, I'm saying in fear.
In fear. Okay, so they're afraid of this guy. Well, if they're afraid of him, why are they even arresting him in the first place?
Your boss said so.
Because your boss said so. That's right. Because his eyes just said so. You better do it or you're going to be in trouble next. Okay, could be. It's an interesting idea. I mean, I kind of thought a little bit like you. It's almost like, there's power in Jesus' name, correct? All right? Every knee will what? Every knee will bow, right? Whether you believe in him or not, right? Every knee is going to bow, right? That's what they do right now. Oh, you're Jesus? It's like they can't help it. It's like, they just do it. I don't know, that's just what popped in my head, but it just seemed like an odd thing to happen when they're going to arrest the guy, right? So that's just something that I thought, okay? So I did want to look at 8 and 9 really quick, right? And what's the, idea that John's trying to convey right here? Because, things happen in the other Gospels slightly differently. We'll talk about those in just a second. Jesus answered them, I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go. This happened so the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. Right? So what's John trying to show us right here? What role is Jesus doing?
Looking out for something.
Isn't he? He's looking out for disciples. No one is going to hurt you guys, right? I'm the one you're looking for, right? Don't worry about that. Now, of course, who charges ahead to try and protect Jesus? Who does that? Come on, y'all. We know the story. Right, so Simon Peter, right, comes off, chops the guy's ear off, right? And we hear his name in this one. I think it's Malchus, right? And so we get all that stuff happening, right? But Jesus is the one who's protecting them, right, in this moment. I think that's a really cool thing. This little part back here, I have not lost one of those you gave me. He's referencing himself when he spoke about being the bread of life, right? So this is back in chapter 16. Lots of references to chapter 6, right? He says, the Father has given you me, right? Okay, you will be in me and you will have eternal life. And I have not lost one of those that you gave me, referencing, people that God has given me. So that's what he's talking about. I am protecting you.
That goes back to his prayer for him.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. It goes back to his prayer for him too. Excellent. Did Jesus lose Judas? Okay. Oh, my wife threw her hand up real quick on that one. What do you think?
He prays, Jesus specifically makes a statement about that in chapter 12, 17. And he says it again here in this verse. And I think it speaks to, he had just prayed in the garden. He's saying, it's your will, not my will. So he references, he lost one so that the scripture would be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And then he says again here, as I'm fulfilling the scripture, as he speaks it. So to me, the point is, did he lose one? Only Judas. But it was because that was in place before him.
That was in place before him, to fulfill all the scripture. Okay. Any other thoughts, ideas?
Well, it goes back to, I can't remember which psalm, but it talks about being betrayed by one of his friends.
Oh,
David talked about that in some, so it was going to happen.
Yeah.
By some close acquaintance. And John doesn't talk about Judas kissing him.
No. I was going to get to that. Yeah, you're exactly right. We don't hear the betrayed by kiss. I had that picture up a little bit earlier. John, doesn't say that. And I don't know if John left that on purpose. You can say whatever, right? There's some omissions that we have here coming up. You want to cover those real quick? We got the kiss, right? That's not in here. What other things do you remember from the other Gospels that aren't kind of mentioned in John? Because I just covered the part where Jesus is arrested. There's some things. What's that?
That they flee.
That they flee, right? Disciples flee, right? Because Jesus even foretold that, you will run away from me, right? What about before the soldiers come? What is Jesus doing?
He was praying.
He was praying, yeah, he was praying, wasn't he? Right? So he's sitting there, he was praying, right? Praying so deeply that, blood ran out of him. I think that's mentioned in Luke. I think that's one of the only Gospels that mentions that, okay? Right? And even, while he's praying, I think it happened 2 or 3 times, what did he ask?
He asked his disciples to be with him for an hour.
Right, and what did they do?
Going back to sleep.
we're falling asleep, yeah. So we have that mentioned in the other, Gospels. But John just, leaves that out. We also don't hear about the servant's ear being healed, right? Okay, right? Remember, he gets his thing cut off, he puts his ear, heals it back, and that's when he says, those who live by the sword, right? That stuff happens. So, I think the important point to remember that John's trying to get across, and that we all need to understand, is that Jesus allows himself to be arrested, right? Kind of like Brandy was saying, he allows himself so that this will be fulfilled, right? I mean, this is something. Did he have to be arrested? Did he have to submit? Absolutely not. Had people tried to arrest Jesus earlier? They did, right? And it's like a small little verse, right? They tried to arrest him after he had made a healing or done something, but
He had his hat full of sword in though.
but they just couldn't quite get him, could they? Right? For whatever reason, right? They just couldn't quite get Jesus.
His time hasn't come.
Yes, time had not come. He said that over and over, right? My time has not come, but now it has, right? And his time has come to be glorified to the Father. Okay. So he is brought to Annas, right? Who is Caiaphas' father-in-law? I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that before. And Caiaphas is the same guy that asked for Jesus to be arrested earlier, right? Do you remember when we start hearing Caiaphas first? Do you remember when we first? What's the thing that really, I guess, I can say shakes up, or the big thing that makes people mad?
The prophecy?
I think part of it may be the prophecy. I think part of it, though, is when Lazarus is raised from the dead. That's when Caiaphas really gets involved. We hear him. And Caiaphas not only wants Jesus to die, that's what we hear when Lazarus is raised, but he also wants who else to die? Lazarus too. Which I always thought, that's really bad, man. Lazarus just got brought back. We want to kill this guy again. But, why do they want to do that? They think Jesus is committing blasphemy, right? They think it's apostasy. They think, that this guy is going to win over the hearts and minds right away from them. So,
Especially if Lazarus is walking around.
yeah, Lazarus is living proof, right, of what Jesus can do in his power. That's exactly right. So they had to quell that, squash that, whatever you'd like to call it. So then we come to Peter, right? And earlier, Jesus had told Peter what was he going to do. That's right, he's going to deny him 3 times. And so this part, I think, is written interestingly, and John does this several times before. It's kind of a odd way to write, I think, right? But this is in verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. So another disciple, and again, this disciple, those more than likely are references to who? John, right? He writes about himself in the third person, which is, we said this earlier, but that is a weird way to write about yourself. Have you all thought about that? Why John doesn't say I? Or, even, I guess name himself. Huh? What's that? All right, wasn't tooting his own horn, right? He does say something like, I think, the disciple that Jesus loved best, right, or something like that. So that sounds like a toot right there a little bit.
Unidentified.
Right, but unidentified, right? But it's just an odd thing, right? And I did think it was interesting when it said this disciple was known to the high priest. So I don't know if John has a relationship, he knew him when they were kids or whatever, but John is the one that goes with Jesus where? Into the courtyard to witness what happens. John is an eyewitness, literal eyewitness, right, to what transpires, right here in the courtyard with these priests, right? Were the other disciples there? And not according to John, right? But they heard about the story. So,
Crucifixion too.
what's that?
He was there at the crucifixion.
He was there at the crucifixion as well, too, yeah. So again, very, very interesting. At least interesting to me. Right? Maybe I don't think it's interesting. But Peter had to wait outside the door, right? So when Peter waits outside the door, it was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also staying around with them, warming himself, and this is when he makes his first denial, right? Just like Jesus predicted, right? Because people are like, hey, you're bad. You're with this guy, aren't you? Oh, no, not me. Okay? And has this ever happened to us? Have you ever fit in or tried to fit in with people that you shouldn't fit in? Or made denial about something you should be proud of? I have. I can't speak for everyone, but I know I have. Right? To my shame, I have. Right? I mean, should I speak up for Jesus when I have the opportunity to? Absolutely. Have I done it every time? I have not. And why not? Why shouldn't I do it? Why shouldn't I be proud all the time? Is it just like a natural inclination we have, like we don't want to cause like an issue? Do we not want to argue? Yeah, I think that may be part of it, right? But if we don't speak up, what do you think? He denies him. That's right. If we deny him, he'll deny us. That's exactly right. Okay. I mean, if we stay quiet enough and let other people control whatever narrative you want to talk about, right, then the truth doesn't come out. Right? In Jesus and John, we hear over and over, I am the truth, I am the light, I am the way. Nobody comes to the Father except for me. Okay, we hear that over and over and over again. Right? We have to be able to be brave enough to speak the truth when we have an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many instances also where I've not spoken when I should have spoken up, but then there's the side too that God give me the wisdom to know what to say in what situations so that I'm effective if I choose to speak, how I speak.
Yeah.
So there might be instances where somebody would say, well, I feel guilty because I didn't speak up there. Well, maybe the approach to that person was different and, just blasting them in public.
I mean, you do have to be careful,
Yeah.
don't you, in how you say it, how you approach things. What do you think if Peter would have spoken up? So how do you want to say something like that?
I was just going to say, I guess piggybacking on this, that's the reason why it's so important for us to pray daily. Ask the Lord to help us to have the wisdom that we need to say the things that we need to say and behave in the way that we need to behave. And I find that once you step out and speak up, the next time is easier. It's like any other habit that you develop.
Yes, it is.
If you keep doing it over and over, then it becomes a natural part of
That's
who
right.
you are.
That's right. I mean, we're not born to have the spirit of fear, to be afraid to speak up. You have to be able to do it. And it is like a good habit. That's an awesome point.
And you start with those simple things. I'll just say this little incident that happened to me.
Okay.
So long ago, I was working in the health department in Washington, D.C., and working with another nurse. And so the phone rang. The nurse said to me, if that's Mrs. So-and-so, tell her I'm not here. And I said, well, you better leave now. Because if she calls, I have to tell her it's you. And after I did that, I thought, boy, that was easy.
Good for you, Miss Lottie. I like that. Better leave now. All right. I'm going to remember that one for a long time. That's a good one.
When they're questioning Peter, you got to understand the element of they could kill him for the right answer.
Yes. Yes.
That plays a lot in it. Where his answer could have been, that's none of your business, or that's not for you to worry about, instead of blatantly denying it. But that dying thing kind of adds a whole different area.
I agree to you. I was going to get to that. Yeah, but I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that's an outstanding point. He was probably scared because he could have lost his life. He could have been brought on trial alongside Jesus. You're exactly right. Okay. Stephen had a different moment in Acts, right? Stephen had a completely different moment in Acts. He was surrounded, and when he was asked, what did he do? He went through he started back with Abraham and Moses, and he just kept going all the way through Jesus until they decided to stone him, right? I mean, that was his choice and his decision, right? Something completely different. And Jesus told him that, right? People will hate you because they hate me, right? So again, there's a whole lot we can go. And I'm not judging anybody, right? But, it's in the scripture, so it's just something that we need to talk about. So the high priest is questioning Jesus at this point. And I thought, all right, all you legal eagles, all right, I thought this would be an interesting thing to bring up. All right, let's see what you remember, right? Let's go back to civics, right? 5th, 6th, 8th Amendment. What do you remember that they are? Does anybody remember?
Self-incrimination.
All right, so the fifth is self-incrimination. That's exactly right. It also covers your right to due process, right? Due process means that, you know, you get rights when you're arrested, right? People have to have evidence against you. They have to have facts against you. They can't just come and grab you. All right, my mother-in-law, she's legal, so I'm waiting on her to say something. Anybody remember any of these other ones?
Eighth is unreasonable searches, right?
I can't remember. I have to have them up here. I had to look them all up. The eighth is, yes, crimes for unusual punishment. Okay, right? Unusual and cruel punishment. 6, it's probably the biggest one here, right? Is that your right to a trial by jury, right? You have the right to confront, to counsel, and that your trial is supposed to be in the public arena. It's supposed to be seen, right? It's not supposed to be any secret trials, right? So, "2,000 years later, somebody can go out and commit a heinous crime, right? Worst thing in the world, right? Whatever you want to imagine. And they will be treated better than Jesus was 2,000 years ago. And Jesus' only crime was healing people and speaking the truth. You know, it's not in the Gospels, but it's something I thought about. I think it's a powerful thing because here are people trying to persecute Jesus for absolutely nothing. Okay? And you can think about how people can be treated even today.
They ain't trying to convince him that he's God, though. They ain't trying to blast him because he's trying to do his works of God.
Right.
And that's what his punishment was.
That's what they thought, right? You know, that's what they thought. Because he claimed to be God, because he did these miracles, they thought he was speaking blasphemy. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You know, I put my own opinion up here that, you know, I think everyone kind of just in our head, we think, oh, well, it's Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus, he knew these things were going to happen. He expected these things to happen.
I don't want to give him a robe and turn him to a
Sure.
pot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I think what we forget is that he was human, right? Right? He was human. He was sweating blood because he was praying that this maybe didn't have to happen to him, right? But if this is your will, Father, then, you know, I'll see it through. Okay? I mean, he was human too, right? So he still doesn't get any of these things, right, that people consider their natural and inalienable rights today. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to think about. All right, so here we have him being questioned, right, and he's asked about his teachings, right, and, you know, he says, I've spoken openly to the world, right? I haven't done anything in secret. I've always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said, right? And when he says this, what does the guard do? Slaps him, right? And it just strikes him, right? It just absolutely, you can't talk that way to authority. You can't do that, right? It's not so much, I think, about the case that people are bringing against Jesus. It's about the power and control that they want to try and have over him. Right? That's what it seems to me. All right. So then he is bound up and he's taken to Caiaphas, right? So this is after the interview with Caiaphas' father-in-law. All right. So now we have Peter's second and third denial. All right. Beautiful picture right here. There's Jesus in the back, right? Here's Peter right here. Here's the rooster crowing, and there he's around the fire, and people are pointing to him. And again, they ask him, "Hey, weren't you with this guy?" Even a guy who was at the garden, right? An eyewitness. "Hey, man, I know you. You look familiar. I saw you there, right?" But I think in John says he was related to Malchus, the guy who got his ear cut off, right? And again, Peter, no, right? But it all happens just like Jesus said. I think for Peter, right, when the rooster crows, and I've seen this in various movies, the way it's depicted, this is the moment, right? This is the aha moment for him. This is that God moment where he realizes it is all like he said would happen. This is everything. But again, Jesus told him, "I told you this so that you would believe." Do you think this strengthens Peter's faith, even though he has denied Jesus? Do you think he's going to be guilt-ridden now? What do you think? All the above? Yeah? Okay. I don't know. It's just something that, I thought about a little bit, right? So it ain't just a river in Egypt, right? But I think it's fair to ask, why do we lie to ourselves?
just seemed for that he was ready to perform the action and fight. But when it came time for the internal, that's where he denied.
It's such an interesting thing, isn't it? Right? Yeah, I mean, he's, impetuous in that one moment, ready to fight and stand up. But in this moment, even though people have him pegged, like, I think they know he's lying, right? I mean, they know that he's lying. He's standing there just bald-faced lying, and they know that, okay, you're the guy, right? But, we still, and I think we lie to ourselves sometimes about things that we don't want to think. And Lynn talked about that a little bit last week or the week before, right? But I think it's something that we fall into the trap of doing sometimes. It's something that we have to watch out for. Okay. So
I like the artist's picture on that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture.
The
Yeah.
rooster's watching him with his eye. Okay, I'm getting ready to crow here pretty soon.
Yeah, I know. I try to find good ones, but that was a really good one. I really wanted to bring back to that. I thought that was a beautiful one. That's probably a famous one somewhere that I have no clue who the author is. Yeah.
Just a little side note, the three denials is one of the evidences that we use that Jesus was resurrected, because here you have Peter. You can say there's a lot of pressure there because of all the threats and everything. On the day of Pentecost, that same pressure was there. He still could have been arrested and put in prison for following Jesus. And the denial and the cowardice here and the boldness when he's preaching the sermon in Acts 2, the same guy, just a few days later, something definitely happened to him that made him a believer and changed his...
Well, a stronger believer. I think he was a believer, yeah.
More courageous.
More courageous.
Even his convictions, where he was willing to die.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. That's a great point. Okay. All right, so now Jesus is brought before Pilate, right? And Pilate is, what's his role, job here? So he's a Roman prefect, right? Okay, meaning he is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful guy in this immediate area, correct? He has the power to sentence people to death. He has the power to carry out laws and judgments and rulings and everything, right? And so he's brought before him, right? And what is the actual legal case against Jesus? We've talked about this a little bit, and I read an article the other day, which is very interesting. I should have written it down. I don't know if y'all would have liked it, but I thought, oh, okay, kind of cool. But what's the actual legal reason, right? Eddie kind of mentioned it a little bit ago.
Paul came in as God, and Jesus said, "You say I am."
Okay, so he's claiming I'm God, right? Okay, and so that's obviously a big blasphemy. That's a big deal, right? But if that was the blasphemy by Jewish law, what's supposed to happen? It's supposed to be stoned to death, right? I mean, that's what's supposed to happen, right? If we're being all legals here, and that's what's supposed to go down, then by Jewish law, they're supposed to pick up stones, stone to death. That's the end of it, right? That's what happened to Stephen, correct? Okay, they don't do that, okay? What do you think, Miss Patty?
We were just looking there, that he's not a criminal, why are you writing that?
I'm so glad you said that, right? I mean, because that's one of the first things that they say. Let's read through it really quickly. Okay, let's read through it really quickly. And I'll talk a little bit more if I remember about the article that I read. Does somebody want to read this? Okay, I guess I'll read it then. Okay, all right. So Jesus before Pilate, and I'm reading from the NIV. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" If he were not a criminal, they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." So just like Ms. Patty was saying, they're basically saying that, whoops, sorry, I'm going too fast. They're basically saying that he is, well, they don't even say that. They're just saying he's a criminal, right? They're judging him before he's even have a chance to be judged. I mean, he's not even accused of a crime. They just say, well, he's a criminal. He's a bad guy. So that's why I brought him before you, right? They don't even lay out the charges against him, all right? Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." Right? Even Pilate knows, okay, all right, he's a bad guy, then what are you supposed to do with him? You're supposed to go stone him, right? That's what you're saying. "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea, Jesus asked, or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now, my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What is truth? Retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. So that takes us to the end of the chapter. All right. So is there a formal legal charge of wrongdoing against Jesus by these people? Not really, not at all, right?
Well, the priest didn't like what he was doing,
You're exactly right. The priest didn't like what he was doing, right? The priest wanted to get him arrested. The priest wanted to get in trouble, right? So that he could have the power. That's exactly right, all right? Now, I think there's a little bit of irony here in this statement, and this is talking about the high priest, all right? By now it was early morning, all right? So Jesus had already been arrested last night, so it was early morning. And to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. What's ironic about that statement? They won't go, there's Jesus, all right, go up into the palace, right? The Jewish leaders won't follow Jesus up into the palace. Why?
Well, they're committing all the other sins, but excluding that.
That's right, okay? They're committing all these other sins, right? Lying, right? A bunch of other things. But they're like, okay, but we still want to be clean, right? According to the laws of Moses for the Passover meal that's coming up. Okay? Any other irony that you see here?
Self-righteousness.
Self-righteousness, right? Okay? We're so awesome, we're so great, right? We don't want to make ourselves impure by going up to look at this trial that's a travesty of justice. Okay? What else? Jesus is the Passover lamb. They don't want to be unclean for the Passover? Are you kidding me? Right? This is the Passover lamb right here. Right? You're missing the point. Right? But they don't see that. Okay? Those are all awesome, outstanding points. All right. So, the Jewish leaders, when they're asked about, and this is the part that we just read, Pilate says, what are the charges you're bringing against this man? And so, what do they say? Right? How do they respond? First off, they say what? He's what? He's a criminal. So there's the presumption that he is already what? Guilty, right? There's no trial, right? He's just automatically guilty, right? Now Pilate offers to let the Jews do what? All right, you can take him away and you can judge him by your own laws. You can do it, right? Pilate, kind of time and time again, y'all know the story. What does he try and do? He tries to kind of, okay, y'all go take care of it, right? Why are you making me do it, right? Y'all go take care of this thing, right? The Jewish leaders protest, and they say, well, we can't because we don't have the power to do what? We don't have the power to execute anybody, right? We don't have the power to do that. I mean, over and over you see the Jewish leaders, they basically want Jesus to be crucified, executed, right, by this Roman leader, right? That's what they're looking for. Right? So even though we talked about 3 denials, right, I think it's interesting that now we start to have affirmations, right? So Peter says 3 denials, but this is the first affirmation for these people asking for Jesus' death. Okay? First time. Right? Let's go a little bit farther. Right? So the questioning keeps going, right? So this is a very interesting part, beautiful part, right? When Pilate is questioning Jesus inside the palace, away from the others, are you the king of the Jews? Right? Very famous part, right? And Jesus' reply, right? His first response is well,
Did you come up with it yourself?
yeah, right? Is that your own idea, right? Did you come up with that yourself? Why does he ask that? I always find that an interesting thing that he asks. Well, it kind of sounds like to me, this is just me, that maybe it was suggested, right? Okay, I mean, Jesus kind of knows, right? Okay, this, are you just repeating back what you heard from Caiaphas and those other people, right? Did you hear rumors about me earlier? I mean, it sounds like he knows, right? Pilate, I think in this moment, is a little confused, maybe. He says, am I a Jew, right? Like, do you think I know what's going on, right? He said, your people have handed you over to me, right? You know, I didn't arrest you, right? These other people brought you to me. This is not on me. You know, what have you done, right? And here's Jesus' answer, right? Again, a beautiful answer, right? What is Jesus saying in this moment? What is he trying to explain to Pilate? Is Pilate open to it? Pilate moved by it? What is he saying to him? Nothing any different than he's done his whole life up to this point. He's telling Pilate the truth. Right? Just speaking the truth. Just telling him. Now, you know, does Pilate get it? I don't think so. I don't think Pilate quite understands, right? Because Pilate's response is that, oh, so you are a king, right? So you're admitting that you're a king. Is this an issue for Pilate if Jesus claims to be a king, claims to be sovereign, claims to be a ruler?
Yes.
No.
Yes and no. Okay, why yes?
Roman law.
Roman law, right? I mean, they're supposed to be under Rome. Who's supposed to be the big head honcho?
Caesar.
The Caesar, right? Okay, so if you're claiming to be a king, well, we can't have that. Okay, so that would be a problem that I guess under, you know, Roman law, whatever you want to call it, that Pilate would take care of, right? Pilate may see justification to kill Jesus, right? Okay, but Jesus answers him again, right? You say that I am a king, right? You say that. I didn't say that. You say I am a king, right? So again, very interesting. But back to our earlier point that we tried to make earlier, remember Jesus allows himself to be arrested, right? To fulfill what's going to happen. Jesus' time has come. He's going to be glorified through his sacrifice as part of God's plan. This is something that has to happen. And just to me, at this moment, I just can't help being overwhelmed by how brave Jesus is, right? I mean, he's standing in front of the God, right? The guy that can put you to death with the word, the guy that can make your life absolutely miserable. Jesus knows what is going to happen. He knows. And he still stands up there, humbly and peacefully and truthfully, right? Trying to explain to Pilate who he is. Doesn't deny it, right? Doesn't apologize for it. Doesn't say anything else, right? He just tries to tell Pilate the truth. And I think that's an amazing thing. I mean, I think that's such a cool thing. I try and talk to my football guys, and sometimes, you know, I think kind of the common misconception is that, you know, Christians are supposed to be, you know, you turn the other cheek all the time, you're supposed to be a wimp, you're supposed to submit to people all the time, like that kind of thing. I can think that can be a misconception of some people. And I say, you know, you want to talk about the toughest person who ever lived, that's Jesus Christ. You're supposed to emulate and you're supposed to follow, who went willingly to the cross to die for our sins, right? A horrible death, was tortured for it. And you're letting people tell you that you're a wimp, that you're not brave, that you don't have the power of God in you? Like, think about that for a little bit. And here's one of those moments when Jesus does that. Why does Peter change? Why does he have courage, right? Why does he learn to stand up? It's because of this person that he followed, right? It's because of this person, right, who has the courage to do that, to this big, powerful leader of men, right? But not in the grand scheme of things. So to me, that's just a cool moment, right? And again, like, I think it's easy to say, oh, but it's Jesus, he knew he was going to be okay. Well, he was still a man, right? He still was going to have to undergo this horrible stuff. All right, so the King of Kings being questioned still, right? And this is where he says the part, you say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Back to the point, I'm just telling you the truth, right? Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And then Pilate's final response there, what is the truth? Now that's always, you know, I don't know about y'all, that's always stuck me a little bit. What is Pilate saying right there? Like what do you think about his whole statement? Is he philosophizing with Jesus? I mean, what do you think?
I think that's a possibility because of the Roman world and the Greek world and just, we do expect.
Sure.
It's true.
Sure. What is truth? Is it what you see on TV? You can believe everything, right? Oh, it's what you read on the internet, because that's always right. Okay? It's what you read in a book. It's what your friends tell you. Right? And what is the truth? Right? I mean, is he being cynical when he says this? Truth is whatever I want it to be? No, that's one way to look at it. You remember, is it Ben-Hur, or is it the Ten Commandments, with the guy, is it Ramses, who always says, I said it, so let it be written. Isn't that what he says? So it was said, let it be written. You remember that? Right? That always cracks me up. He's like, I said it, write it down, that's what it is, right? Is that how Pilate is being right now? I don't know, Jesus, we know, says, and John says, that he is the what? He is the truth, right? Okay.
I see it more of a conflict within himself because he's got one side and now a truth. And in the next chapter, if you read ahead, he gets frightened when he heard that Jesus comes up Son of God. So I think it's an inner conflict of
Yeah, Pilate, I think, is another very interesting person to, and that's why I bring this up. So when we get ahead next week, for that exact reason, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's like, how is Pilate wrestling with the truth here? Do I believe you? Do I believe them? Is he feeling guilty? Is he scared? He wants to, I wash my hands of this and I give it away to other people. Like, where does he sit with this whole thing?
Hearing about it.
Well, you think he's probably heard about it before a little bit from some other people?
Pilate is not finding out what's going on because the priest had to go to him
Right.
to tell him what's going on. That's when Pilate found out what was going on.
Okay, so maybe this is the first time he's heard about it. All right. I think there's another bit of irony here too, because the embodiment of truth, the light and the way, is standing before Pilate on trial. So when Pilate is saying, what is the truth? Brother, the truth is standing before you. And you're talking to the truth. You want to talk about the truth? He's right there. But you don't know it. And again, that's kind of like one of those, like, oh wow, right? And and in some ways it's too bad for Pilate, right? Okay, so when we end up, another great picture right here, and this is Pilate kind of talking to the crowd, right? He says again, I find no faults, in this guy. I don't know what to say. I mean, he does at least admit to the leaders, like, I don't see a criminal. I don't see the problem here. I don't know what's going on. And he does make the suggestion, according to the Passover custom, right? That I release, a prisoner, right? So do you want me to release the king of the Jews, right? Now you can read this a couple of different ways. Is Pilate, again, the cynical Pilate who's trying to stir up the crowd, right? Trying to make them the ones that say, yes, we want to kill Jesus. Or is Pilate, trying to free Jesus? You can read it a couple of different ways. I don't know which one's the right way, to be honest. All I know is this is what was part of God's plan. Right? That's all I know for sure. But instead of wanting Jesus, right, this is the second affirmation, right? Remember, we had the first call. They said, well, we can't execute anybody, right? And now for a second time, they said, no, we don't want Jesus, right? We want Barabbas, right? So we had 3 denials. We've had 2 affirmations for Jesus' death, right? Is there a third affirmation coming up in 19? I want you to think about that and look for that, right, before we get together for class next week. Okie dokie? All right. Y'all want to pray with me real quick before we get out of here? All right. I think we had a good one today. I hope it was a good one. All right. Let's pray, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this class. And thank you for the opportunity we have to learn about the truth, to learn about Jesus, to learn about the sacrifice that he made for us. Cleanse us of our sins and to grow close to you. Please continue to watch over us and care for us as we go to our church service. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.